Let me tell you a little bit about the hero's journey. This is a concept from the work of Joseph Campbell. I read a book he wrote called The Hero with a Thousand Faces, and it tells about the story of a hero who goes on a journey from the ordinary world to the world of the unknown, and then returns again back to the ordinary world. And many myths, if not nearly all myths, follow this basic structure essentially. In the first part of the book, from the editor's forward, he talks about some of the things Campbell described here. He says, quote, well, they say Campbell described the universal story as follows: a hero ventures forth from the world of common day into a region of supernatural wonder. Fabulous forces are there encountered, and a decisive victory is won. The hero comes back from this mysterious adventure with the power to bestow boons on his fellow man. End quote. And I notice here that the cyclical nature of the journey, it follows a circle. Ordinary world, world of the unknown, back to the ordinary world again. Why do we tell the stories that we do about whatever it is that is out there? This is a quote from the forward. And I like this quote because it emphasizes that it helps us navigate. Well, from this I understand that it helps us to navigate the journey of life and a sense of purpose in life. And stories are guides, they're examples, they're lessons to learn from, these sorts of things. Joseph Campbell said that myths are public dreams, and dreams are private myths. We're talking here about, in a very Jungian sense, we're talking about the collective, unconscious, common psychological challenges. The standard path of the mythological adventure of the hero is a magnification of the formula represented in the rites of passage: separation, initiation, return, which might be named the nuclear unit of the monomyth. That's another quote from the book. I'm going to be quoting extensively from the book, so just know that I'll be quoting a lot, really, from Joseph Campbell, his quotes directly from the book. We're going to begin our journey in the first stage. Stage 1 is called departure. And the first part of our journey, as described by Joseph Campbell, is the call to adventure. He says, one of the ways in which the adventure can begin: a blunder, apparently the merest chance, reveals an unsuspected world, and the individual is drawn into a relationship with forces that are not rightly understood. Blunders are not the merest chance. They are the result of suppressed desires and conflicts. They are ripples on the surface of life, produced by unsuspected springs, and these may be very deep as the soul itself. The blunder may amount to the opening of a destiny. End quote. And this kind of gives us the chance to reflect in our own lives. What are your suppressed desires and conflicts? Which unsuspected worlds have they revealed? Have you blundered upon? Joseph Campbell continues, the herald or announcer of the adventure is often dark, loathly, or terrifying, judged evil by the world. Yet if one could follow, the way would be opened through the walls of day into the dark where the jewels glow. Or the herald is a beast, as in the fairy tale, representative of the repressed instinctual fecundity within ourselves, or again a veiled, mysterious figure, the unknown. End quote. Just to mention, fecundity means the ability to produce abundance of new growth or offspring. Which heralds are calling you, or have called you, to adventure? Which adventures are calling you on? Of course, within the call, there is also the promise of a great reward at the end of the journey. This is often known as the Holy Grail, or you might say, as Joseph Campbell says, the ultimate boon. Boon, as it's called. B-O-O-N, boon. Just means a kind of reward of some kind that the hero is going to try and get on the journey. This first stage, as Joseph Campbell says, of the mythological journey, which we have designated the call to adventure, signifies that destiny has summoned the hero and transferred his spiritual center of gravity from within the pale of his society to his own unknown. End quote. Which unknown zones is destiny summoning you to? The next stage, number 2, of departure is refusal of the call. Quote, refusal of the summons converts the adventure into its negative. Walled in boredom, hard work, or culture, the subject loses the power of significant affirmative action and becomes a victim to be saved. His flowering world becomes a wasteland of dry stones, and his life feels meaningless, even though, like King Minos, he may through titanic effort succeed in building an empire of renown. End quote. How have you refused the call to adventure? How have you walled yourself into culture, lost the power of significant affirmative action, and become a victim to be saved? It's very tempting to refuse the call, because the call is quite scary. It's quite a dangerous thing. The idea of going on an adventure, it seems, you might think is going to be quite appealing to the hero, but what happens when it actually happens to you, when you do receive a call to change? You know, how many people actually want to do that? How many people want to go through that change? Because really all journeys require a certain level of change, you might say. Quote, the refusal is essentially a refusal to give up what one takes to be one's own interest. End quote. I like this quote because it just illustrates the fact that you have your own interests, you have your own selfish desires, and of course you're holding on to these. And you realize that to actually go on the journey, you're going to have to sacrifice some of this comfort, some of the security. You know, are you able, are you willing to do that? What are you afraid you could lose if you accepted the call to adventure? Which limiting beliefs about yourself are holding you back from going on the journey, from going on the adventure? Quote, an impotence to put off the infantile ego with its sphere of emotional relationships and ideals. One is bound in by the walls of childhood. The father and the mother stand as threshold guardians, and the timorous soul, fearful of some punishment, fails to make the passage through the door and come to birth in the world without. End quote. In other words, how are you acting like a child and refusing to mature? How are you refusing to take responsibility for the calls to adventure that you've been receiving in your life? The next stage, stage 3, supernatural aid. Quote, "For those who have not refused the call, the first encounter of the hero journey is with a protective figure, often a little old crone or old man, who provides the adventurer with amulets against the dragon forces he is about to pass. The helpful crone and fairy godmother is a familiar feature of European fairy lore. Through omnipotence, misquoted that, it says, though omnipotence may seem to be endangered by the threshold passages and life awakenings, protective power is always and ever present within the sanctuary of the heart, and even immanent within, or just behind, the unfamiliar features of the world. One has only to know and trust, and the ageless guardians will appear. Not infrequently, the supernatural helper is masculine in form. In fairy lore, it may be some little fellow of the wood, some wizard, hermit, shepherd, or smith, who appears to supply the amulets and advice that the hero will require. The higher mythologies develop the role in the great figure of the guide, the teacher, the ferryman, the conductor of souls to the afterworld. The hero to whom such a helper appears is typically one who has responded to the call. The call, in fact, was the first announcement of the approach of this initiatory priest. But even to those who apparently have hardened their hearts to the supernatural guardian, I'll read that part of the quote again. But even to those who apparently have hardened their hearts, the supernatural guardian may appear. For, as we have seen, quote, well able is Allah to save, end quote, end quote. Have you ever received aid from a helper who helps you across the threshold into the next part of the adventure, into the world of adventure? What help do you think you could receive to help kickstart your journey if you're thinking of going on a journey, be that internal or external, whatever the journey is? 4. The crossing of the first threshold. Quote, with the personifications of his destiny to guide and aid him, the hero goes forward in his adventure until he comes to the threshold guardian at the entrance to the zone of magnified power. Such custodians bound the world in the 4 directions, also up and down, standing for the limits of the hero's present sphere or life horizon. Beyond them is darkness, the unknown, and danger, just as beyond the parental watch is danger to the infant, and beyond the protection of his society, danger to the member of the tribe. As the rising smoke of an offering through the sun door, so goes the hero, released from ego, through the walls of the world. End quote. What are your threshold guardians on your journey? The things that are holding you back from advancing further? How are they preventing you from crossing into the world of adventure and advancing further on your journey? And more importantly, how can you overcome them? Stage 5 of Stage 1. The belly of the whale. The idea, quote, that the passage of the magical threshold is a transit into a sphere of rebirth is symbolized in the worldwide womb image of the belly of the whale. The hero, instead of conquering or conciliating the power of the threshold, is swallowed into the unknown and would appear to have died. That passage of the threshold is a form of self-annihilation, but here, instead of passing outward, beyond the confines of the visible world, the hero goes inward to be born again. The disappearance corresponds to the passing of a worshipper into the temple, where he is to be quickened by the recollection of who and what he is, namely dust and ashes, unless immortal, the temple interior, the belly of the whale, and the heavenly land beyond, above, and below the confines of the world are one and the same. That is why the approaches of and the entrances to temples are flanked and defended by colossal gargoyles. Dragons, lions, devil slayers with drawn swords, resentful dwarves, winged bulls. These are the threshold guardians to ward away all incapable of encountering the higher silence within. The devotee, at the moment of the entry into the temple, undergoes a metamorphosis. His secular character remains without. He sheds it as a snake its slough. Once inside, he may be said to have died to time and returned to the world womb, the world navel, the earthly paradise. No creature, writes Ananda Kumaraswamy, can attain a higher grade of nature without ceasing to exist. End quote. End quote. This, of course, implies an ego death, or death of inner demons, that must occur within the belly of the whale. For once inside the belly, the hero must face himself, and with that, his own inner limitations, demons and fears. This is the dark night of the soul, the moment where the hero must shed his ego and undergo a psychological transformation in order to develop the character and resolve necessary to go forward on his journey. Within this new womb, they must then be reborn again, anew. Think of it in terms of these questions. When have you had to undergo a psychological change, transformation, or rebirth? A dark night of the soul. Which inner limitations, demons, and fears will you need to overcome in order to progress further on your journey? And this now leads us to the second major stage of the hero's journey. Stage 2, initiation. Stage 1 of Stage 2, the road of trials. Quote, once having traversed the threshold, the hero moves in a dream landscape of curiously fluid, ambiguous forms, where he must survive a succession of trials. The hero, whether god or goddess, man or woman, the figure in a myth or the dreamer of a dream, discovers and assimilates his opposite, his own unsuspected self, either by swallowing it or by being swallowed. One by one, the resistances are broken. He must put aside his pride, his virtue, beauty, and life, and bow or submit to the absolutely intolerable. Then he finds that he and his opposite are not of differing species, but one flesh. End quote. This somewhat relates, I think, to the belly of the whale, as many more dark nights of the soul will be encountered along the road of trials, during which the hero must confront the self he is resisting and integrate it. Kind of put it together, piece it together, integrate that self. A large portion of this journey consists of the road of trials, along which the hero encounters threshold guardians, external gatekeepers, and whales' bellies, multiple whales' bellies, internal selves, to overcome and or integrate. So consider these questions yourself. What trials have you faced on your journey, present and future trials? How will you succeed through these trials? Will you need any training, skills, or help? What obstacles will you face in your trials, and how will you overcome them? Stage 2 of 2, the meeting with the goddess. Quote, the ultimate adventure, when all the barriers and ogres have been overcome, is commonly represented as a mystical marriage of the triumphant hero soul with the queen goddess of the world. This is the crisis at the nadir, at the zenith, or at the uttermost edge of the earth, at the central point of the cosmos, in the tabernacle of the temple, or within the darkness of the deepest chamber of the heart. She is the paragon of all paragons of beauty, the reply to all desire, the bliss-bestowing goal of every hero's earthly and unearthly quest. She is the incarnation of the promise of perfection, the soul's assurance that, at the conclusion of its exile in a world of organized inadequacies, the bliss that once was known will be known again. End quote. I think the language in there is very poetic. I like that. And I think the question that comes up really to contemplate is this one. What is the reply to your desire on your journey? What do you want? And how is that going to be replied for you? And only you really know the way in which your desires are going to be replied to. The next quote. The goddess guardian of the inexhaustible well requires that the hero should be endowed with what the troubadours and minnesingers termed the gentle heart. Aware, gentle sympathy, it was named in the romantic courtly poetry of 10th to 12th century Japan. Quote, within the gentle heart, love shelters himself, as birds within the green shade of the grove. End quote. End quote. So only by gentleness can the goddess be comprehended and rightly served. Quote, the meeting with the goddess is the final test and talent of the hero to win the boon of love, charity, amor fati, which is life itself, enjoyed as the encasement of eternity. End quote. How are you being tested on your journey to win the reward of love? Think of these things. Stage 3 of 2. Woman as the temptress. Now for this stage, I don't really find much from Joseph Campbell of much, well, there wasn't really much value for me personally, although it may be different from you. This is because although Joseph Campbell explores this with this world of the temptress, I feel that he explores only he explores only the Freudian aspects of this stage, the Freudian implications of the stage. And I don't think that's too helpful. I think the following interpretation is more helpful, which is sort of my interpretation. It goes like this. At this stage of the journey, the hero realizes that there is a higher purpose than romantic love, and that they must, to some extent, avoid the temptation of romantic love in order to proceed further on the journey. Joseph Campbell says, quote, the crux of the curious difficulty lies in the fact that our conscious views of what life ought to be seldom correspond to what life really is. End quote. So in this sense, the hero has mistaken romantic love with the goddess for the ultimate reward or purpose. In reality, though, the idea that the goddess should make the hero happy is the foundation of an unhealthy relationship, because this expectation places too much pressure on the goddess. Indeed, the woman would rather the hero seeks fulfillment in a higher purpose than her, so that he may then be in a position to provide for her, rather than take from her. For me, this idea was inspired by a book I read called The Way of the Superior Man by David Dada, where he mentions that for a man, a woman is not his purpose. And I don't really think that that necessarily has to apply just for men, necessarily. But I think that it's a useful starting point. And it goes to show that I think you can't kind of rely on happiness through just another person. There are other forms of attaining happiness which you need to go through. Other I say happiness, but maybe things like fulfillment and purpose-driven work and things like this. There are other forms of fulfillment than through a relationship. If your only form of fulfillment is through a relationship with someone, then it's going to make you unhappy, I think. So this is what is meant by the romantic lover as temptress, temptation, or distraction. Whether or not they are this way intentionally, they may not be intentionally tempting you, but it's not about them. It's about the hero. It's about what is the hero's purpose? What is the hero's ultimate journey? Is it really for this goddess, or is it for something even higher? So this realization may lead to despair at the initial loss of meaning, as in Shakespeare's Hamlet's exclamation. Quote, "Oh, that this too solid flesh would melt, thaw and resolve itself into a dew. How weary, stale, flat, and unprofitable seem to me all the uses of this world." End quote. Nevertheless, the hero must push on, past the initial moment of despair, and realize that there is a higher purpose beyond the goddess, and whether or not they separate from or establish a healthier relationship with their romantic lover, they must avoid temptation and distraction in order to pursue that higher purpose. I want you to consider yourself. How have you been distracted or tempted elsewhere on your journey? Has obsession over romantic love been a distraction on your journey? How can you refocus on your higher purpose, do you think? The seeker of the life beyond life must press beyond her, surpass the temptation of her call, and soar to the immaculate ether beyond. This is a quote from Joseph Campbell, and I think that pretty much encapsulates my interpretation of this stage. Of course, many other people might disagree, but this is my interpretation. So, stage 4 of 2 is called Atonement with the Father. Quote, "The ogre aspect of the father is a reflex of the victim's own ego, derived from the sensational nursery scene that has been left behind, but projected before. And the fixating idolatry of that pedagogical non-thing is itself the fault that keeps one steeped in a sense of sin, sealing the potentially adult spirit from a better balanced, more realistic view of the Father, and therewith of the world. Atonement, at-one-ment, consists in no more than the abandonment of that self-generated double monster, the dragon thought to be God, superego, and the dragon thought to be sin, repressed id. But this requires an abandonment of the attachment to ego itself, and that is what is difficult. One must have a faith that the Father is merciful, and then a reliance on that mercy. Therewith, the centre of belief is transferred outside of the bedeviling God's tight, scaly ring, and the dreadful ogres dissolve. It is in this ordeal that the hero may derive hope and assurance from the helpful female figure, by whose magic, pollen charms, or power of intercession he is protected through all the frightening experiences of the father's ego-shattering initiation, only to find, in the end, that the father and mother reflect each other, and are in essence the same. When the roles of life are assumed by the improperly initiated, chaos supervenes. When the child outgrows the popular idol of the mother breast and turns to face the world of specialized adult action, it passes spiritually into the sphere of the father, who becomes for his son the sign of the future task, and for his daughter of the future husband. Whether he knows it or not, and no matter what his position in society, the father is the initiating priest through whom the young being passes on into the larger world. The mystagogue, father or father substitute, is to entrust the symbols of office only to a son who has been effectually purged of all inappropriate infantile cathexes. Cathexes meaning the libido's charge of energy. Quote, the paradox of creation, the coming of the forms of time out of eternity, is the germinal secret of the Father. It can never be quite explained. End quote. I think the Father is, in mythology and in our, say, collective unconscious, the creative force. The Father is the creative force. The hero must meet his creator, resolve any conflicts with him, then become the creative force himself. In doing so, he gains the creative power and energy to confront the final obstacles of his journey. Quote, the problem of the hero going to meet the Father is to open his soul beyond terror to such a degree that he will be ripe to understand how the sickening and insane tragedies of this vast and ruthless cosmos are completely validated in the majesty of being. The hero transcends life with its peculiar blind spot, and for a moment rises to a glimpse of the source. He beholds the face of the Father, understands, and the two are atoned. For the son who has grown really to know the Father, the agonies of the ordeal are readily borne. The world is no longer a vale of tears, but a bliss-yielding, perpetual manifestation of the presence. End quote. Some questions to consider at this stage. What is your relationship to your father or father figure on this journey? Are there any fears, misunderstandings, limiting beliefs, emotions or conflicts you need to resolve with your father or father figure in order to proceed further on your journey? What can you learn from your father figure? How would he deal with the obstacles you face on your journey? What tools or other things would he create? Try to forgive yourself for the mistakes you've made on this journey. How can you learn from them? How can you come more from the creative rather than reactive mindset on your journey? Remember that the word creative is an anagram of the word reactive. What do you need to do to create in order to overcome the final obstacles and achieve the ultimate reward on your journey? How can you become the creator on your journey? How can you create what you want rather than avoid what you don't want? And that leads us to the next stage, stage 5 of 2, apotheosis. The definition of apotheosis is as follows: the highest point in the development of something, a culmination or climax. Also, the elevation of someone to divine status. Quote, the two apparently opposite mythological adventures come together, the meeting with the goddess and the atonement with the father. For, in the first, the initiate learns that male and female are, as phrased in Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, two halves of a split pea, whereas in the second, the father is found to be antecedent to the division of sex. The pronoun he was a manner of speech, the myth of sonship a guiding line to be erased, and in both cases it is found, or rather recollected, that the hero himself is that which he had come to find. I'll say that again. The hero himself is that which he had come to find. The hero, viewing all things with equal regard, beholds himself in all beings and all beings in himself. In whatever way he leads his life, that one lives in God. End quote. End quote. In this stage, the hero undergoes a process of self-realization or spiritual awakening. He remembers his true power as divine hero by integrating all the lessons he has learnt on his journey, and is now ready to face the final battle for the ultimate reward. A question for you to consider for yourself. What divine aspect of yourself do you need to remember in order to be ready for the final challenge of your journey? And this leads us to stage 6, which is, well, stage 6 of 2, which is, I like to think of this as probably the final battle, you might say, of the journey. The name of stage 6 of stage 2 is the ultimate boon. And remember, I said earlier that the ultimate boon simply means the Holy Grail, or the ultimate reward that the hero is working towards at the end of this journey. Quote, "The ease with which the adventure is here accomplished signifies that the hero is a superior man, a born king. Where the usual hero would face a test, the elect encounters no delaying obstacle and makes no mistake." Another image of indestructibility is represented in the folk idea of the spiritual double, an external soul not afflicted by the losses and injuries of the present body, but existing safely in some place removed. End quote. Imagine yourself as an indestructible hero in the final battle. As Joseph Campbell says, quote, "The symbols give away and are transcended." End quote. This always reminds me of the story of Buddha and the raft. Buddha, I think, said something along the lines that the path, obviously on the way, you might say the path or the journey on the way to enlightenment is like crossing a river, and that Buddha will provide the raft. But once you have crossed the river on the raft, Buddha says to throw away the raft, completely throw away with it. You don't need the teachings anymore. You don't need the raft anymore because you've already reached enlightenment. And so really, I think this links to what Campbell is saying when the symbols are transcended. At this point, the hero is already indestructible. The hero doesn't need any more symbols or teachings because they have already been through that stage of atonement and with the Father, and also apotheosis, this kind of realization, this enlightenment. They've already been through that, and so they're now ready to face the final battle at the end, at the climax, you might say, of this journey. Quote, "The elixir of imperishable being, its guardians dare release it only to the duly proven." End quote. I think this links with the fact that you eventually have to let go of infantile symbols, of childish symbols and meanings, in order to grow as a hero. So it's all well and good having these mythological stories to guide us at the beginning of our journey. But once we've matured on our journey, and once we've outgrown these symbols, we're now ready to just let these go so that we can face the final battle. Quote, "But the gods may be over-severe, over-cautious, in which case the hero must trick them of their treasure. At once the hero Maui took hold of the giant Mahuika's head and cut it off. Then he possessed himself of the treasure of the flame, which he bestowed upon the world." End quote. This is of course symbolizing the slaying of the final monster and seizing the ultimate reward to bestow upon the world. Of course, this is famous, this scene of the hero slaying the monster, of the hero slaying the dragon. This appears in so many stories, of course. I always think of St. George and the Dragon. I like George and the Dragon. My name's George, so I like to think about that. George and the Dragon. But of course, there are many other stories in which the hero slays the final monster, and this is the moment, of course, after slaying the monster, the hero then has access to the Holy Grail, the treasure at the end of this journey. Finally, they come to the Holy Grail. Quote, the Japanese have a proverb, quote, the gods only laugh when men pray to them for wealth, end quote. The boon bestowed on the worshipper is always scaled to his stature and to the nature of his dominant desire. The boon is simply a symbol of life energy stepped down to the requirements of a certain specific case. So just remember that the reward or the boon is simply scaled down to whatever level of development the hero has reached. If the hero is at a stage of development where their biggest desire is to be rich, or well, that's not necessarily rich, but is to just be wealthy, is to have lots and lots of money. That's a slightly different thing, wealth and riches. But let's say wealthy. The hero wants to be wealthy. The hero wants to have a lot of money. If that really is the hero's highest desire, then that's the stage of development the hero's at. But if the hero has developed higher, then maybe the Holy Grail, maybe the reward has somehow changed somewhat. It's somehow changed its meaning for the hero. Perhaps throughout the course of this journey, and perhaps at the beginning of the journey, the hero thought that the reward would be something like riches, or would be something like wealth, not riches, but wealth or money or something like that, right? But actually, once they finally attained that, they realized that the biggest reward could be something like the wisdom they've gained along this journey. What have they learned throughout this journey, and how they can use that to impact the world, to help the world, to share that with the world. So yes, the reward may have changed its meaning now compared to the beginning of the journey, because the hero and his desire has grown. And I want you to consider for yourself, what is the ultimate boon or reward for your hero's journey? What ultimate obstacle or final boss, final monster, final dragon will you need to overcome with ease in order to gain this reward? And of course, I do believe that the final monster will be easily slain once you have overcome your inner demons through stages like the belly of the whale. And that concludes the main stage 2 of the hero's journey. That concludes the initiation stage. And now we have the very famous main stage 3 of the hero's journey, return. This main stage is talking about, of course, the return to the ordinary world. The hero eventually has to come back from the adventure world and return to the ordinary world again. Stage 1 of 3, refusal of the return. Quote, when the hero quest has been accomplished through penetration to the source, or through the grace of some male or female, human or animal personification, the adventurer still must return with his life-transmuting trophy. The full round, the norm of the monomyth, requires that the hero shall now begin the labour of bringing the runes of wisdom, the golden fleece, or his sleeping princess, back into the kingdom of humanity, where the boon may redound to the renewing of the community, the nation, the planet, or the 10,000 worlds. But the responsibility has been frequently refused. Even the Buddha, after his triumph, doubted whether the message of realization could be communicated." End quote. I want you to consider for yourself, how might you return to the ordinary world from your journey? Why might you refuse the call to return with your reward? And I like this stage, the refusal of the return, because this sort of is neatly corresponding to that stage 2 of 1, which was refusal of the call to adventure. The refusal of the return is now on the opposite end of the circle. Initially, the hero refused to go on the journey, and now the hero refuses to go back to the ordinary world because of how much the hero has grown in this world of adventure. So it's an interesting stage to be at. Stage 2 of stage 3, the magic flight. Quote, "If the hero in his triumph wins the blessing of the goddess or the god, and is then explicitly commissioned to return to the world with some elixir for the restoration of society, the final stage of his adventure is supported by all the powers of his supernatural patron. On the other hand, if the trophy has been attained against the opposition of its guardian, or if the hero's wish to return to the world has been resented by the gods or demons, then the last stage of the mythological round becomes a lively, often comical pursuit. This flight may be complicated by marvels of magical obstruction and evasion. A popular variety of the magic flight is that in which objects are left behind to speak for the fugitive and thus delay pursuit." So I like this. I find this quite funny. I'll end quote there. I find this quite funny. This idea of the hero leaving perhaps a cardboard cutout figure of himself as a distraction to his pursuers who are chasing him. The hero, he's running away with the Holy Grail, with the reward, and his pursuers are chasing him, and the hero is throwing back all these distractions to try and run away from the pursuers who are chasing him as the hero rushes and tries to escape back to the ordinary world with his reward. Quote, "Another well-known variety of the magic flight is one in which a number of delaying obstacles are tossed behind the wildly fleeing hero." End quote. I just think again of something like banana skins being tossed behind the hero as his pursuers are chasing him. Quote, "The magic objects tossed behind the panic-ridden hero, protective interpretations, principles, symbols, rationalizations, anything, delay and absorb the power of the startled hound of heaven, or startled hound of heaven, permitting the adventurer to come back into his fold safe and with perhaps a boon. But the toll required is not always slight." End quote. Think about this for yourself. How will you escape and return from your adventure with your reward? Who or what will chase you on the way back to the ordinary world? Stage 3 of 3, rescue from without. The hero, quote, "The hero may have to be brought back from his supernatural adventure by assistance from without. That is to say, the world may have to come and get him. For the bliss of the deep abode is not lightly abandoned in favour of the self-scattering of the weakened state." Quote, "Who having cast off the world," we read, "would desire to return again? He would only be there." End quote. And yet, insofar as one is alive, the world will call. Society is jealous of those who remain away from it, and will come knocking at the door. If the hero, like Muchukunda, is unwilling, the disturber suffers an ugly shock. But on the other hand, if the summoned one is only delayed, sealed in by the beatitude of the state of perfect being, which resembles death, an apparent rescue is effected, and the adventurer returns. End quote. This stage always reminds me of, I think, at the end of Lord of the Rings, Return of the King, when Frodo and Sam are rescued by these birds. They ride on the back of birds. The birds rescue them. This is a kind of rescue from without. I want you to consider for yourself this question. How might you be saved or rescued from the world of adventure at the end of your journey? Quote, "He has yet to confront society with his ego-shattering, life-redeeming elixir and take the return blow of reasonable queries, hard resentment, and good people at a loss to comprehend." This is obviously, the hero has now nearly completely returned to the ordinary world, which leads to stage 4 of 3, the crossing of the return threshold. Just as there was a threshold into the world of adventure, there is also a threshold from the world of adventure back into the ordinary world as well. Quote, "The two worlds, the divine and the human, can be pictured only as distinct from each other, different as life and death, as day and night. The hero adventures out of the land we know into darkness, there accomplishes his adventure, or again is simply lost to us, imprisoned or in danger, and his return is described as a coming back out of that yonder zone. Nevertheless, and here is a great key to the understanding of myth and symbol, the two kingdoms are actually one. The realm of the gods is a forgotten dimension of the world we know, and the exploration of that dimension, either willingly or unwillingly, is the whole sense of the deed of the hero. The values and distinctions that in normal life seem important disappear with a terrifying assimilation of the self into what formerly was only otherness. The boon brought from the transcendent deep becomes quickly rationalized into non-entity, and the need becomes great for another hero to refresh the word. How teach again, however, what has been taught correctly and incorrectly learned 1,000 times throughout the millennia of mankind's prudent folly? That is the hero's ultimate difficult task. The returning hero, to complete his adventure, must survive the impact of the world. This is the sign of the hero's requirement now, to knit together his two worlds. Not everyone has a destiny, only the hero who has plunged to touch it and has come up again with a ring. End quote. I want you to consider these few questions of this stage here. How do you teach the wisdom you gained through your journey to the people of the ordinary world who have not been on the hero's journey? How do you bring the two worlds of the ordinary and adventure together? Stage 5 of 3. Master of the two worlds. Quote, "Freedom to pass back and forth across the world division, from the perspective of the apparitions of time to that of the causal deep and back, not contaminating the principles of the one with those of the other, yet permitting the mind to know the one by virtue of the other, is the talent of the master. The cosmic dancer," declares Nietzsche, "does not rest heavily in a single spot, but gaily, lightly turns and leaps from one position to another. It is possible to speak from only one point at a time, but that does not invalidate the insights of the rest." End quote. So for this stage, the master of the two worlds, how can you pass back and forth from the ordinary world to the adventure world after your journey is complete? Of course, this kind of late stage question will only come up for you after the journey is completed. And that leads us to the final stage, the very, very final stage of the main final stage. So this is stage 6 of 3, freedom to live. Quote, "What now is the result of the miraculous passage and return? Do without attachment the work you have to do. Powerful in this insight, calm and free in action, elated that through his hand should flow the grace of Viracocha, the hero is the conscious vehicle of the terrible, wonderful law, whether his work be that of butcher, jockey, or king." End quote. Now you have completed the hero's journey. What will you now do with your new freedom to live? Teach your wisdom? Train new heroes? Or you could begin a new hero's journey. Whatever you choose to do, release your attachment to the results of any past, present, or future journeys, because the joy of life is in the journey itself.